All right, welcome for this Canadian Patriot podcast, where I am very pleased to be joined by Mike Holmes, who is the patriarch of an incredible family, the Holmes family, who I have just been introduced to as a family of citizens who have discovered, especially in the course of this whole COVID nightmare, that there is this higher, ugly, albeit important reality that has been moving us into a very bad place for a number of years. And this family, unlike many families, really rolled with the punches, as we say, and embraced that higher fact of life, and really took the opportunity over the past 2.5 years, as I've learned, to understand what they need to understand about those causal forces. And this family is in Alberta, and Mike and his family have been really taking a citizen activist orientation. And people watching the Canadian Patriot understand by now, if you've been a long time watcher, that there's a difference between being a subject or a citizen. A subject is somebody who, might vote maybe, but otherwise waits for whatever government they were born into to ultimately make the big decisions about their lives. A citizen who's not a subject understands that our rights are something which were fought for, which have to be defended, and that all freedoms come with responsibility. Freedom is not the freedom to just do what I want to do, but the freedom comes with a responsibility to maintain it. So I'm very impressed with you, Mike. I'm impressed with your family. You guys have really embraced reality, and today we're going to talk about something that happened in Alberta that most people who are watching this from Canada or the United States or Europe or beyond need to know more about. I'm sure if people are watching this from Alberta, they probably have a certain idea. If they were at the event, they have a great idea, but most people weren't. And so I'd like to know, since you were there every day, you were voting at this AGM. What is this AGM, this annual general meeting? Why was this special? What was going on?
All right. Well, first off, thank you very much for taking the time to want to know more about this story. And you're right; it's a big deal for those in Alberta that are trying to take a responsibility of their citizenship. So, annual general meeting for the United Conservative Party. This is the second year that my family got to participate in it. The first time was last year. They're the slated agendas usually for these is to go over governance, to go over policy resolutions, to vote on things that you would like to petition your party to bear in mind and to move forward on behalf of its members. And if members are acting in good faith and conduct for the rest of the Albertans that don't participate, you're trying to bear them in mind as well as you move forward. So that event had, if I'm not mistaken, 1,380 participants last year, which was large in and of itself. There's been a lot of citizen activation in Alberta. There's lots of different groups, right from like obviously the truckers at one point, and that was a Canadian-wide event. But some of the downstream trickling that also happened is other groups like Taking Back Our Freedoms, Taking Back Alberta, Alberta Prosperity Project, Action for Canada. I could list a lot. There's several groups, so I won't go too off on a tangent there. But all these different groups started to rally citizens to be involved and to start taking ownership of the apathy. Alberta's apathy got us into this trouble, so now we have to kind of like, okay, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So my family got involved last year. Just a little preview. The Calgary director, who the position on the board, won by 10 votes, and my family was 6 of those votes. So it does let you know that just even that in and of itself can make a difference. And I guess that was where things got to spell for us. It's like that we were feeling alone. We were feeling like your political structure is not worth it. It's a waste of time, and perhaps there's good arguments that I could reason for that. But we decided, well, we can't answer for everybody, but we can answer for ourselves. So we got involved. So then another year goes by, and there's more memberships. There's different MLAs. We had an election. Daniele Smith is the leader. We got a majority government for the United Conservative Party. So interestingly enough, this was the first year that our family got involved with like they put out like there was like 125 policies that get put out to be voted on. 2,000 members of Alberta actually did all of the rankings, which wasn't the case last year, and now this year it's happened. So that's 2,000 more individuals that decided to actually read and rank all of these policies. Our family of six did a not chosen policy night, and we went through it all. And so we played our role of participating in that. And then I'm also now a member of a constituency association, which I never was before. And my children we volunteer for things now when it comes to events. So this AGM was a big deal because, and one of the reasons for this story and to be able to have this interview with you now is we just had officially 3,780 attendees to this year's AGM. So
Fantastic.
that's
And that you're saying you were saying that that's the biggest in history, right? We've never had anything like
so
this.
it's the largest political gathering, I believe, in Canadian history, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, by all means, people can go and fact check it, but as far as we've been led to believe and being able to Google it and try to do our research on the matter. Yeah, it's the largest that's ever happened in Canada. I mean, even the federal UCP convention in Quebec, I think they had 2,000, maybe 2,200, I think, something like that. So it's like, and we're just this was just a provincial AGM, right? This wasn't federal. This is a provincial AGM. So yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, technically, we're just a part of Canadian history. And there's a lot of Albertans that should feel really good about that and hold their heads up high. And it was neat. It was neat to see so many citizens that were of a sovereignty mindset. Like all the policies and the governance got whittled down. So there was like there was about 19 or 20 governances that got voted on. There was 29 to 30 policies that got voted on. But most of the policies, if not all, were all like Alberta first centric and sovereignty, bodily autonomy, wanting to make sure that the like mandates were going to hit the bricks, and the lie of the net zero 2035 push that gets shoved in Alberta's face was outright rejected. And when you do your voting, the policy will hit a screen, and then there'll be an opportunity for debate at a yes and a no mic in the crowd. There'll be 3 individuals that will be allowed to go and say no to a policy, 3 that can say yes. And then the vote gets handed in, and everybody gets a card, a placard for green, yes, flip it, red, no. And so when these are being voted on, you're looking at like, there's like, 3,700 people in this room, and the vibe and the sensation, the feeling when it was like, how do you feel about the 2035? We want a policy to go against this net zero and oppose this ludicrous agenda that just takes away from life. And watching all those cards go up with sort of like a unanimous crowd, it was something to behold for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And for people listening, there's something that a lot of people don't recognize or don't know about, and this includes many Canadians, which is very peculiar to the Canadian system. Very different from most other so-called nation states in the world, is that in the Canadian system, the provinces have an enormous amount of sovereignty. Of course, at different times throughout history, we see that the financier oligarchy centered that what once was and still is the still undead British Empire has used states' rights movements at different times to try to divide to conquer, to get people to think small, think local, in order to bust up any type of freedom movement that was otherwise taking federal power. In the case of the US, we had Lincoln, who had to deal with a lot of this stuff. However, in Canada, we have a different sort of construct whereby we don't have like a constitution like the United States does, but originally, when the British were orchestrating the setup that was to be Canada, they wanted to keep something that would be more easily divided to be conquered. And so there was an idea that, okay, resources should be under the jurisdiction purely of the provinces. There'd be a lot of the provinces can make foreign treaties with other governments of the world, bypassing any federal administration. And so, you could say much of the time, or some of the time, that could be used to keep us divided. But whenever you have a certain moral impulse or a real human being with morality who attains political power on a provincial level. We have seen great good emerge that was disruptive to the technocrats that would otherwise wish to use their federal powers in Ottawa to constrict or subdue the aspirations of the various parts of Canada to develop and to use their resources, use their capabilities of directing their own destiny. And so that's just an interesting anomaly of Canada's history that I just find very, very fascinating. So in the case of Alberta, there is an actual fight right now that you won't get from the international media or even much of the federal media that will obscure what's been going on. But maybe you could say a little something about what's peculiar about your current premier, Danielle Smith, and a little bit about the fight in Alberta specifically, which is so very important.
Well, with regards to Danielle, the sentiment on the ground from the individuals that I got to speak with and the different groups that I participated in with, the citizens want to rally around her that are with it, like that I got to speak to this weekend. I can't speak for all of Alberta. We got 4.23 million people here, so I'm going to be that bold. So within my, I guess, the echo chamber of the United Conservative members of this particular AGM, the rallying around Danielle is the Sovereignty Act, for one thing. It would be the fact that she's pushing back against Trudeau's government. There's honest criticisms that can be found there, but taken as a whole, there's not too many premiers that are looking like Scott Moe to a degree in Saskatchewan, but there's not too many premiers that are actually trying to sort of hold their own and put up a hand to Ottawa. One of the themes of even the swag was more Alberta, less Ottawa, and that seems to be what Danielle at this stage of her tenure as leader of the province is trying to uphold. So this is the motivation of these groups is to put as many freedom-minded, sovereignty-minded, authentic individuals around her that we can humanly possibly get. Because even if you have a bad politician, you can put the pressure on them to do the right thing. If you get enough accountable minds to each other as citizens and as a community, and now that I'm even a member of a constituency association, the president of my particular association has nothing but praise for Danielle Smith, because even when they run their monthly presidential calls, where we have all 87 constituencies get on a call for the president's calls, Danielle Smith attends every one, whereas our previous leadership under Kenny, that was not the case. So you have a lot of individuals that feel like they're being listened to, which is a very important quality. And then there's also a lot of people that are aware that the establishment still has reach. The things that have happened to us in Alberta, I mean, you're talking about a province at one point's leading cause of death was death unknown. I mean, like, really? So there's pain, there's suffering, there's hurt, and people are trying to figure out how to navigate forward and rally under Danielle to get good people around her, which is the big part of what this AGM was the other half of the board. Last year, 9 members, all relatively freedom-minded, relatively sovereignty-minded, Alberta first-centric in their delineation of their world. And now we just had a full slate flop of the other 9. So now all 18 board members of the UCP party are Alberta first-centric. They want sovereignty, bodily autonomy, no mandates. We've got to reform our healthcare system, which I know is a war in and of itself because AHS is a mafia. There's no doubt about that in my mind with any research that I've done. So, that would be the hope. That would be the reason why Danielle Smith, to answer your question, is there's something there to rally around, and God willing, she will use that positive energy in a responsible, right manner to keep Ottawa at bay and perhaps exercise that. You talked about tools that provinces have, and we have not anteed up to use those tools. And it's time. We have to use them. And hopefully then it can inspire. We're actually trying to learn from Quebec in a lot of ways, to be completely honest. Quebec has a great threat of being able to move forward with their sovereignty, and they don't really care about Canada. They know that they can pull the pin on it, if they really, really needed to. It seems like that threat works for them. I don't know for sure because I'm not in the ground on Quebec, but yeah, yeah, that
Right.
should help with answering that question.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you're saying that, and I mean, as part of my research into Canadian history, that was a bit of a surprise because we were born into. I was born in 1982. You're probably born around. You're my generation. We're born into a world that
I'm
has certain things like running water and electricity. Um, and we often take for granted where do these things come from. And Quebec has a lot of hydroelectric power. I didn't see it being built. It was already built when I was born, but it was there. A lot of people in British Columbia and Alberta, that we have a certain standard of life we expect. But the stories, the fights of how this happened are not really given to us so much. It's been really scrubbed or sanitized out of our history books. So when I started digging into where did this hydroelectric bounty come from, this giant engineering culture that Quebec has, I realized it had nothing to do with the federal government of Canada. That's what I naively presumed. It was like the government wanted it at some point, they made it happen. It's like, no, it was because you had British Columbia under W.A.C. Bennett back in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, who, especially the 50s and 60s, was able to use his the provincial rights to develop hydroelectric power in British Columbia all the way into the Peace River zone in the north, build rail, and he really built up an economic power despite being sabotaged left and right by operatives from the Bank of Canada, from Ottawa, who were trying to throw sand in the gears the whole step of the way. And it was by that bounty that he created of upgrading the physical, economic, productive power that all of a sudden there was this huge amount of surplus that could then be given as a loan to Quebec that also was trying to fight against these technocratic freaks that just wanted total control, no development. And they were able to bypass again the Pierre Elliott Trudeau administrators in the federal level and got that loan from BC and started putting that to work, building our hydroelectric power. But it was always a fight. Sometimes people actually died, and to defend their conscience and what they knew was right and possible as far as their ability to use political power to advance the emancipation of people in Canada, in the provinces. And it is contagious when one province can do it and do it successfully, that bears results. People follow suit. They're like, wait, we can do that too. So the fact that at this point, BC's fallen morally behind that historic legacy, unfortunately. But despite that we have these historic precedents and something in real time living right now. I'm blown away about the support for bodily autonomy, the idea also of empowering parents to actually have the final say in terms of the indoctrination processes that are flooding into all schools across Canada, but especially Alberta. So actually, parents in Alberta have the final say to decide what goes on with the grooming and other types of gender ideology that's being infused. That's amazing. That's happening on top of an energy policy that says no to this net zero insanity. Fantastic stuff, man. Really, really fantastic stuff.
Yeah, to comment on that, the child, the parental rights facet was also really, really well represented in the policies. Um, but once again, it's policies and governance of a party to try to encourage so that the board can then push at legislation at Danielle and caucus that this is the interest of the party, which is it's the citizens. There's still a long way to go. I mean, when push comes to shove, we look at this as a remarkable victory. We just made some Canadian history. When it comes to like Million Man March or the even the religious groups are coming together on this one when it comes to the children, the Sikhs and the Muslims, the Christians and the Jews. This does not matter. We're talking about our children now. So there is definitely a fire that is burning. Because there was even some anti-protesters, if we're going to also give credit to the devil is due, I guess, if you will. There was individuals that were protesting the UCP AGM, and from the usual suspect communities that I would say, feel like grooming is their right, which that's fine. But needless to say, it's such a small amount of people that were there. It's like the 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 grassroots wave is growing, and yeah, there's even some intergroup tensions for sure. There's human beings involved, so there's fallibility, there's egos, much like what you described, the Tale of Two Americas in your book series, as well as the Untold History of Canada. There is two stories going on here, so I guess that I have a tepid caution as well, because it seems that we do have this wonderful thing that's happened, and we're going to take these steps forward and be proud of the victories, but not so proud to understand that this is we're talking 60, 70 years that unraveled the culture and the apathy. Like, this has been a long game that's been played on us as a group of citizens, if you will. And so we're fully aware, at least I can speak definitely on behalf of my clan, that we also know we have a long fight ahead of us. And these are steps, incremental progress, if you will. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be encouraged by with what's happening here.
I think that's a very, very fine way to. We could end it here, but actually, you know what? There's one other thing. What you just said sparked one question in my mind. Would you say that uh, amongst the 3,800 people who were present, participating at this caucus, at this meeting, um, did you find that the majority tended to come from the urban zones of Calgary, Edmonton, or did you find that there was mostly rural farming leadership that was taking the helm, or a bit of both? How would you just draw that?
Yeah, actually, this is a good question. I'm glad you asked it. So I'm glad we didn't end it there, because I want to sprinkle a little more context onto this. First off, I believe, if I'm not mistaken on my numbers, we had over 378 members that registered that were in the demographic of 14 to 25. So that's almost 10 to 11% of the total members that showed up. Or sorry, that's a little too high. But anyways, just there's a youth movement, so that was pretty cool to have that many young people be involved. Most of them probably got asked by their parents to get involved, of course, which is fine, fair enough. But they came nonetheless. They participated, and they got to see it happen. And that includes my clan as well. So just a nod to any of those who are feeling that despair that the young people are lost. And it's like, no, the old guard needs to ante up, and that's what we're doing. So that way the mirror neurons fire, and the kids see what civic demonstration looks like. And even though they might find some of that stuff kind of boring, most of the feedback that we've gotten, and my kids, we volunteered, we were part of the next gen side of it, so we had our finger on the pulse of that a lot. And then now to get to more to the question that you're asking, is that yes, the adults in the room, if you will, when it came to the election, was rural Alberta. The cities definitely have a challenge in front of them with regards to NDP support. However, I also will say that during our last election, we actually had more conservative minded people just not show up to vote, because we also have to bear in mind the context that when we went through the things that we did as Alberta, as a province, it was the UCP that was in power at that time. So I think that there was definitely individuals that were like, yeah, we're washing our hands of this. Now, I don't know how many people woke up from that. The city still managed to do relatively well, all things considering, during the electoral ridings. But it was definitely rural Alberta that sent a strong message to the whole province. So yes, the large, I believe it was the Bonnyville Constituency Association that actually brought the most delegates from their constituency to this event. In fact, if I recall correctly, and I may be mistaken, so please offer me some grace, I believe 7 other constituencies that were ahead of like major cities like Calgary or Edmonton were all rural before we even hit the map for delegates from the cities. So there's a lot of work to do to try to have unity between the cities and the rural communities. I think that some of the food crisis thing that's going to be coming down the pipeline will help with that process, whether the city likes it or not. There are
Mm.
several things that are coming down the pipeline that might have city individuals being very thankful for all of our ranchers and our agricultural farmers and so forth. So I know my family, we outsource. We love our meat and we love our Alberta beef. And we outsource to local farmers. That's who we go to. We go to ranchers. So the more city folk that can get in touch with the salt of the earth, it'll do the city well to get that unread library effect bridged. Because as you had forementioned, that I just showed up in Quebec and infrastructure was there. Good times make for weak men. So it's like weak, I mean, in the mind. And so they've forgotten just how important these individuals are. I come from an oil field background. I worked drilling rigs for a long time. So I had a very strong relationship with farmers that would come out to the rigs when I worked in Canada. And then when I went international, no different, no different with farmers that would come and work the iron with me, or ranchers, whatnots during the season changes. So yeah, to answer your question, it was a much stronger rural support for what had gone on in the cities. We're hoping to change that. We're going to conduct ourselves with that hope and try to move forward to encourage cities to come around.
No, that's good. And yeah, when you're drowning, you appreciate oxygen more, and when you're starving, food all of a sudden is something you start appreciating a lot more too. So for those who actually know where oxygen comes from and how food happens, their value increases quite a bit, and what they have to say as well, as we've learned as well from things like the trucker convoy, the Freedom Convoy was not something that was made from the intellectual strata of academicians and technocrats or people who were just from the fluffy sort of like white collar class in the urban settings, but this came from the people who actually had a grounded sense of what is reality, even though there's not a lot of like high intellectualism or anything like that. There's a realism that is able to understand fundamental facts, elementary facts of life. Where does production, where does oil come from? Where does our water come from? Like, where does our food come from? That allows for a discussion based on reality and action associated with that. As again, we saw with that process in manifest in the one surprising way it did a couple of years ago, which had a completely fundamental change on international policy and thinking, which nobody expected. And I think, again, there's just incredible bursts of realism, which will, as you just pointed out, come from the blue collar class, the workers, the people who actually have access to their morality, their sense of tradition, their sense of basic facts of what is the purpose of being a human. It's to leave something good for the next generation. It's not like a big mysterious question that we'll never answer, like that Monty Python says, what's the meaning of life? We'll never know. No, I mean, you're born, you're going to do certain things before you die. We're all going to die. We're conscious of that. Why not be part of the solution? Be part of something that's going to make it better for the next generation. Why, at that last point when we're like on our deathbed, think, well, I'm glad I had fun and was part of the problem and left nothing behind. Who wants to have that moment? Nobody. So I think what you've done, and next time we'll chat. I'm looking forward to getting to meet your entire clan as well, and we'll discuss your process, your thinking going forward. But thank you so much for sharing with me and for the audience the current fight, as well as the fight that needs to happen in their part of either Canada or the world, and what type of attitude they have to adopt if they're going to be able to make it through this coming storm. So thank you so much.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm happy to do it. Look forward to getting the clan on to have a chat with you guys, and also just kind of like it's a little proverb, if you will, for this household, is that you can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of reality. So sooner or later, these things catch up to people. The historical context that we have found that you've emphasized emphatically for us is it would be nice if it wasn't at the cost of so many lives.
Mm.
So let's see if we can do something about that.
Amen to that, brother. All right, thank you so much.